Jane, and welcome to another episode of the Rocking Midlife Podcast. And I'm joined by a wonderful lady that I know you're going to love today. And her name is Karen Viesta, coming all the way from Long Island. Welcome, Karen.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so happy to have you here too. It's been a little bit of a mission connecting with my being all over the place this year, but we've made it. And from talking earlier, I know that you are absolutely going to love what Karen has to share. Now, Karen Viesta is a health and life coach, but what's really exciting is that she has an amazing podcast that she was just informing me is number 9 in the midlife category on Apple at the moment. The podcast is called the Wellegant Woman Redefining Midlife Podcast. I will be making sure that that is in the notes so that you can go jump on and subscribe to that podcast as well as this one, I hope, and follow along because I know you're going to love what she has to say today. So we're going to be talking a lot about a blog post in particular that she has on her website, all about how French women have beauty secrets, look amazing, age amazingly, treat midlife like it's nothing. We want to know their secrets. So we're going to be talking all about that today. But before we get into that, Karen, it's so great to have you here. Please tell us a little bit about your story.
Thank you so much. So it was an interesting journey for me. I was certified as a health coach back in 2012. And I went through a 2-year nutrition program. I loved it. I learned a lot. And I really had what I felt was a very healthy lifestyle for years. And then I turned 48 and 2 things happened that really kind of rocked my world. One was that I ended a 24-year marriage.
That's going to really rock.
So suddenly that was this huge, emotional change. And because Mother Nature has a sense of humor, this all happened right as I was entering perimenopause or feeling the symptoms of perimenopause.
Because why deal with one crisis when you can deal with a whole lot at one time? It seems to work like that, doesn't it?
Absolutely. So I had this, this major physical change happening while, the rest of my life felt like it was upside down. And I really struggled for a long time because I didn't know I didn't know what to do to feel good. I wasn't sleeping. My weight was fluctuating. I had a lot of anxiety, which at the time, I was attributing mostly to my emotional situation. But I learned that is actually one of the most common symptoms of perimenopause is anxiety.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize it was one of the most common. That's interesting.
Yeah, I didn't either. But you know what? As I started, learning more and more, I was in such a terrible state and I just couldn't seem to figure out what to do. And to be honest, I wasn't convinced that my doctors knew either. Heard a lot of things like, well, this is what happens in perimenopause, or, well, you're approaching 50. I just wasn't finding answers. So I decided that if I couldn't find the expert that I needed, that I was going to become the expert that I needed. And
perfect.
It motivated me. Yeah, it motivated me to go on and take some advanced certifications in women's wellness and to really research and study and learn. And what I learned, was astounding. I mean, just things that I never heard, that I never knew. And within a very short period of time, everything seemed to kind of balance and I began to feel normal again. So that is really what motivated me to start doing this work. I just had so many people saying to me, well, what are you eating and what supplements are you taking? And, women have so many questions. It's a time of life that I think can be so disorienting and such a struggle for so many women that it really highlighted for me the need that there is for this kind of information.
Oh, I totally hear you. And, when you said how women were asking you, what do you eat? What do you do? Do you exercise? Do you supplement, whatever? You're absolutely right. There's all these little pockets of information out there, but you've got to go digging for it. It's not kind of like a general overview that we're all taught about. When you think about it, using the word teaching here, even back in school, like as school kids, we never heard about menopause. We'd hear about puberty and we'd hear about all the reproductive stuff, but we never actually heard about menopause and aging.
And interestingly, I've had doctor friends of mine share with me that they don't even receive a lot of training in medical school about menopause. It's mostly gynecology and obstetrics. It really is this whole new area of medicine. You know, this whole area is relatively new. So it's just now that I think women are really finding resources and finding practitioners. It's still very hard to find a practitioner who's really an expert in menopause. I do think that, you know, the whole field is kind of opening up. And I think the other piece of it that we can tend to forget is that there is this physical component of menopause, but there is also a component of it that's very much tied to our emotional life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think for me personally, in my experience, and you know, I've seen it with so many of the women who I coach, it really is something that needs to be addressed from both of those angles. You know, it's not a quick fix where you can say, well, take this supplement and you'll feel good.
Yes.
It's a real lifestyle approach, and it needs to incorporate things that are both physical and nutritional and, you know, movement and supplements and all of that. But there is also this big emotional piece. And that's really why, you know, I focus so much in my coaching on thought work and the life coaching as much as the health coaching.
Yes, absolutely. I'm with you there, because that's what I was thinking before. You know, when you mentioned about the doctors, they might know about gynecology or whatever. They're just looking at certain systems in the body, aren't they? They're not looking at the whole picture. And we all know that doctors receive very little nutritional training. So there's all these different components, like you said, the mental side of it, the emotional side of it, the physical side of it, but they're all interlinked. It's not a matter of treating any one of those things separately. And that is really where I'm seeing there is a new wave of professionals such as yourself coming through, who are trying to give an all-encompassing holistic approach to support women who are going through and feeling confused with these random things happening to them, but at the end of the day, they're not actually random, are they? They're part of this bigger picture. Now, I want to tie that into that blog post that I read on your website. And the blog post was called The Beauty Secrets of French Women at Midlife. But before anyone gets caught up thinking we're just talking about beauty as in looking pretty, it's not just about that, is that? You're talking about these French women with how they hold themselves, how they look, how they, you know, what they reflect to the rest of us. Tell us a little bit of your thinking behind that post, and what is it? Why French women? Why did you write, you know, Beauty Secrets of French Women and not, you know, Beauty Secrets of Australian Women or English women? What is it about the French that made you write that blog post?
Well, it's so interesting because I have always I always joke around and say I've never had a love at first sight experience except when I met my dearest friend Eveline. She is French, and when we met, you know, because I have always loved France so much, we just connected instantly. And she has really, over the, you know, 20 years that I've known her, she has been such a huge influence for me when it comes to beauty and style. And I think what's always been so intriguing to me and apparently everybody else, because everyone loves hearing about French women and reading about French women, and even the podcast episode, to this day, it's the most downloaded episode of all the episodes that I've ever recorded.
Wow.
I think we all just have such a natural fascination. And I think what makes them so intriguing and so compelling is that they have a very different paradigm around aging. Now, I don't know much about Australia, but certainly in the US, we are in a youth-obsessed culture.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? Every message tells women you have to look younger, you have to stop aging, or at least stop looking like you're aging. You know, we have such a different mindset than the French, who really embrace it and embody it with such confidence and elegance and and a real focus on wellness at the foundation. You know, it's I always like to say that my friend will say things like, you know, the French believe in less makeup, more skincare.
Wow. Okay.
Right.
I hadn't heard that.
You know, their focus is on wellness and
Mhm.
on being the healthiest that we can be, and having that glow that kind of comes from within, instead of, you know, piling on a lot of makeup
Mhm.
and you know, going for a lot of procedures. And you know, I have no judgment around anybody who
Yeah.
chooses to do that stuff. But it is very interesting to me that in the French culture, there just does not seem to be the same pressure to look young forever.
Yeah, that's
You
interesting.
know,
It is actually something that I spoke about with one of our previous guests, because what's happening now with the amount of accessibility to these different procedures is that the role models for aging, particularly all the celebrities that we know from the States mainly that influence Australia and New Zealand, they're also tweaked now and their faces are so frozen, and yet they're being held up as the role model for the average woman who A, can't afford those treatments, and B, might not be interested anyway. And it's becoming quite separate, isn't it? You've got these people up here and this unattainable image of age, and then you've got the regular women down here going, well, who do we look at? And I love what you're saying. I mean, I'm not anti, like you, I'm not anti those ladies that get those procedures. More power to them. That's fantastic. Do what makes you feel good. But I do struggle with the overall image that's put out there on magazines and online saying, look at this role model for aging, when she is someone who is so artificially maintained.
that's
So
right.
yeah. I mean, but I'm looking at you here. So anyone who's listening in on the podcast, not watching the videos, you have amazing skin. You look incredible. Is that because you've learned from your friend over these last 20 years?
Certainly, she has been a huge influence. And I also was just very lucky. I was, you know, raised by a mother who, when I was 12, took me into a department store and said, now you need to learn how to take care of your skin.
Wow.
And she, you know, we consulted with a salesperson and, you know, found out what products were right for my skin. And she said, you never go to bed without, you know, taking care of your skin. I mean, I was really raised, thankfully, by someone who valued that and taught
Mm-hmm.
me to value that. So I do feel fortunate in that
Yeah.
respect. But I do, you know, it's very funny. I see a difference immediately if I go on vacation, for example, and you know, maybe I'm not hydrated as much as I normally am. I think our skin really reflects what's going on inside. And and I think that that's one of the reasons why, despite all of these procedures, you can just tell, you know, when a woman is healthy and glowing, because
Mm.
there is that kind of inner radiance.
Yeah.
And again, I going back to the French, you know, that's really how they teach their girls to be beautiful. You know,
Yeah.
that's really how they teach their girls to take care of themselves. It's not about, you know, the artificial. It's about really that self-care. And they walk a lot and they drink a lot of water. You know, they just
Yeah.
have a healthy lifestyle. And again, this is generalizing. It's, I'm sure there are French women who don't adhere to these practices, but I think as a culture, you know, we can learn a lot from that kind of focus on wellness as opposed to the outer. And
Yeah.
then, you know, I think when you have that baseline level of wellness, then it's easy to sort of enhance what you have with skincare, with makeup. You know, it's I think everything is so much easier when you're coming from a place of being well rested, being well hydrated,
Yeah.
eating nutritious food. You know, it's just a great um, it's a great foundation to build from.
That's really cool. In fact, I know people are probably sitting there now listening and going, okay, can you give me some what should I do's? So have you got some
Right.
actual tips that you could share with us, that you've learned through your French friend? And through learning about French women. So what are some of the key things that they would suggest to a woman at this season of life?
I love talking about it because I see so many women who are really struggling because they see that these hormonal changes are creating changes in their body and they can't really get a handle on it. And one thing that I will say, and I try to say this to as many women as I can, our weight and the size of our clothing is not a good metric by which to measure our health. If we would all do ourselves a wonderful service to forget about the scale and instead focus on healthy habits. Because the scale tells us very little. It doesn't tell us even body mass index, all the metrics by which we have measured health traditionally really don't tell us what's going on internally. It doesn't tell us, what the body composition is, whether it's muscle, whether it's fat, particularly whether it's visceral fat, which is the most dangerous kind of fat, because that's the kind of belly fat that a lot of women struggle with in midlife. And what's happening is that the visceral fat literally wraps around the organs. It's quite dangerous. But a number on the scale doesn't tell us that. Somebody could weigh something that doctors would say is quote unquote normal, and yet still be carrying visceral fat. So I think the first step really is just understanding that if we really want to improve our health and begin to get that healthy glow and really work on our wellness, we really have to address inflammation in the body. It's hugely important for women at this stage of life to be eating an anti-inflammatory diet, to be limiting sugar and processed foods and alcohol as much as possible. I know it's not, the advice that everybody wants to hear, but the truth is that inflammation is the root cause of every illness and chronic condition. And if we can manage that, it goes such a long way toward helping us to balance our hormones and manage the hormonal shifts and changes that are happening. Mm-hmm. So that's always sort of, what I tell women right off the bat is, let's look at nutrition and let's use food as medicine, and let's really work on managing inflammation in the body. And you will be surprised how many of the symptoms of perimenopause and menopause either disappear or are, severely decreased just by that one change in diet and nutrition.
Wow. Okay. So that's a really good start. And that plays into what you were saying about setting the foundation right, doesn't it? So I love that you didn't immediately go buy this lotion. You've gone, right. Let's deal with the inside inflammation.
And because once you do that, you'll see that. You'll see it in your skin. You'll see it in your body. You'll see it in, a number, in the way that you sleep, in the way that you feel. Like that's really, it's sort of like the secret sauce. And so few women, are really aware that that's really where we have to begin. Most women are looking.
You don't hear it spoken about, do you? I mean, most people, like we said, will jump on and say, use this skincare. They won't say reduce inflammation in the ads. So, that's brilliant. So Karen, so what would be the next step? What are some of the other things that French women do to make them, to help them look so together and confident and glamorous? And what would be your next tip?
So adequate hydration. I mean, I think all of us can attest to the fact that, we look very different and feel very different when we are well hydrated.
Yes.
The French do not drink soft drinks. They, really drink water nearly all the time. And you can see it. You can see it in their skin. I mean, look, it probably helps that they live in an environment that is humid. Paris is rainy and much of France is rainy, and that probably does help. But that kind of dehydration, all it does is make everybody look older. So hydration is, of course, important, not just for the health benefits, but in terms of how we look. It's certainly an easy way to, kind of plump up and give our skin a nice little glow.
So true. I mean, I used to recommend that all the time back in the day when I was working at the gym as a trainer. And you're absolutely right. And I also know for me personally, since I've been working at home these last couple of years, my water intake has lessened.
Mm.
Because I'm not getting the cue. At least in the gym, you'd get a bit of a cue because you'd be thirsty, you'd be sweating, you'd be doing things. But when you're working
Yes.
at home, it's so easy to neglect it or to fill up on your coffees or whatever else. So good call. Good reminder that we should all be
Yeah.
still
And
aware
a
of that.
couple of little tips with respect to hydration that some people don't realize. Number one is that by the time we actually feel thirsty,
Yeah.
we are already dehydrated.
Yep.
So
That's
you
right.
really want to kind of stay ahead of it so that you're not getting to that point of feeling parched. The other thing that is interesting, and I always think, when you water a plant, if you dump a whole, gallon of water in, what generally happens is it'll just come out the bottom, right? You'll see it drain at the bottom. But if you drip a little bit of water at a time, the soil absorbs it, and you don't lose as much. So another good tip with respect to hydration is, instead of sort of guzzling a lot of water all at once, it's really preferable to be sipping, even just a couple of sips every half hour or so, sipping throughout the day. And of course, adding some lemon to the water. I always have lemon in my water.
Yeah.
That's just really great for the liver. It's very detoxifying. So if you can squeeze some fresh lemon or some fresh lime into your water, even some cucumber slices or mint, it makes it a little tastier, but it also has some nice health benefits that way.
Little tip again that I remember when I was working back at the gym that I used to say to my clients, though, if you're drinking the lemon water, make sure to rinse out your mouth from time to time with regular water, because it can affect the enamel in the teeth. Okay.
Yes, that's right.
What's another one for us? Come on, we're all writing our lists now of how we're going to go become these beautiful French women. What's another tip?
Well, sleep.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And unfortunately, it is such a struggle for most women who are in, midlife, because once our cortisol level goes up and our other hormones go down, it creates an imbalance that can sometimes really make it difficult to get a solid 7 or 8 hours of sleep at night. But there are certainly, practices and things that we can do to improve sleep. And, sleep is like, I heard someone refer to it as like putting your brain and your body through the washing machine. It's the time where our cells actually renew and repair and rebuild. So, apart from it just not feeling good to get a bad night's sleep, over time, not sleeping well has some real health consequences as well. So, prioritizing our sleep and really, having good, what I call sleep hygiene, is important. Again, not only for the physical benefits, but it will make you look, it will take years off of your life to have, it will make you look years younger when you've got, a really solid night's sleep, and when you can get a solid night's sleep consistently.
I've got to admit that's an area I'm very slack in, especially when I get into the zone, which I have been recently with work, and I've been doing all-nighters again, slipping back into those teenage habits, and you definitely pay for it the next day.
I don't think there's ever a time in our life where that doesn't have consequences, but I think our bodies are better at compensating for it when we're younger.
Yes.
We hit a certain age where it just becomes harder and harder to kind of catch up after you have a couple of those all-nighters or a couple of late nights. So that's another thing that I'm always encouraging women to just really prioritize sleep, and almost like with kids, like, put themselves on a sleep schedule. Like, have the same wake up time every day, have the same time that you go to bed as much as possible. Try to get the body to reset the circadian rhythm, because that's essentially what's happening, is that, cortisol, which is our stress hormone, is spiking at weird times. We've lost in midlife, we lose that sense of the circadian rhythm. And so a lot of times when you have a situation where you have no trouble falling asleep, but then maybe 3 o'clock in the morning, you wake up and you're wide awake and you can't get back to sleep. Generally what that is cortisol spiking at 3 o'clock in the morning or whatever, So again, the anti-inflammatory diet will help to manage those cortisol spikes. Having a regular sleep time and wake time will help to manage the circadian rhythm. So, a lot of these practices kind of build off of one another. And once you really start to address them, it becomes an easier nut to crack.
Right. So again, it's that holistic thing, isn't it? It's getting all of those different layers in place. And then I guess it can sound overwhelming, but do you encourage your clients to kind of just start with one or two first to get them established and then bring in the rest?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think, it's very stressful when we try to overhaul everything at the same time. And I think sometimes we can have the opposite effect of having us give up entirely.
Yes.
So I'm all for, progress over perfection.
Oh, I like that. Yes.
Consistency over time, small manageable changes. It's the way I think about wellness is, in order for any wellness practice or habit to stick, it has to fit in with the rest of your life.
Yes.
If it's not practical, if it just isn't something that you can manage within the context of your life, you're not going to stick with it. So, it's really I only ever recommend that people, take small steps and gain some consistency and some momentum. And that's really where the magic happens, right? Because think about it, you were a trainer, so firsthand that when we go to the gym and we work out, we could spend 4 hours at the gym one day and we don't see any difference the next day.
No, not at all. Except that you're a bit sore.
Right. And so because we're sore and because it took so much time and because we don't see an immediate change, it can be a situation where you get frustrated and you say, oh, forget it. I'm not working out. It doesn't work for me. Right. So it's the same with any of these wellness practices. It's small changes, and when practiced consistently over time, they have some really amazing, impacts in the body, but we don't see that right away. And we have to just sort of, stick with things and make them work for us.
Perfect. So basically remember that we're in for the long game, and it's not just going to be, hey, it's a week later, I've eaten well, I've drunk water, I've slept, so therefore all my inflammation is gone, all my menopause symptoms are under control, and let's get on with life. It just doesn't work like that, unfortunately, does it?
No, but what I will say is that it is hugely motivating. And again, I see this with so many of the women I work with that, they may not see an immediate result, but, within a few weeks, they're starting to feel a little better. They're starting to sleep a little better. And, it's very motivating. And I know this firsthand because when I turned things around and started to feel better, I was like, oh my God, what else can I do? Like, I feel great. I had energy. Suddenly I felt like, I had cracked the code. So I think that's very motivating too, is that if you give it enough time and you start to see even small incremental improvements, it just makes it so much easier to stick with these healthy practices.
Fantastic. Such good tips. All right. Before we start to wrap up, attitude. What is it about the French women with their attitude?
I think French women believe, and I think they're just brought up to believe, that we get better with time. We get better with age. Our value, they don't believe that their value diminishes with age. Unfortunately, I think in so many other cultures, that's the prevailing mentality, is that we are losing value as we age. We're losing, our beauty. We're losing our sexuality. We're losing our confidence. We're losing our, appeal.
Yes.
It seems like for many other women, that mindset is a struggle. But the French woman seems to just kind of embody this idea that, we only get better with time. We're smarter. We're more elegant. We have, it's not about looking perfect and youthful. It's about, really embodying this state of mind of wellness and elegance. It's how I came up with the term Wellegant.
Yes.
It's called Wellegant Woman, and it's really the joining of these two ideas, which again I think the French do so beautifully. This idea of wellness and elegance working together, and I'm always careful to define the word elegance, because
I was
think
literally about to ask you that. Sorry.
Yeah. I think a lot of people assume that, it's money and the country club and pearls, but that's not it. I think what it is to me, and I would say this is probably, how my French friend would define it as well. It's more simplicity and discernment and a valuing of quality over quantity. So I think it's really, an elegant mindset is really just about discerning what is really serving us, what's really good for us, what really feels good and is beautiful and functional, from what is, what is not. I think when we approach our life that way and we make our choices very intentionally, we can really curate a wonderful, beautiful midlife and create an extraordinary second half of life. But it comes from that mindset of, we are getting better. Life is only getting better as we get older. We're not in decline.
That's wonderful. We are so, like we were saying before we pressed record, we are so in sync with how we feel, because at the end of the day, there's stuff that happens in life, isn't there? We all go through grief, we go through ups and downs. Life can actually really suck at times, yet we still have the ability to choose joy and to look for the good and to be positive and value ourselves and not allow circumstances to oppress us so much that we shrink away.
We were never taught, most of us were never taught, that we can create our thoughts and our beliefs. I think many of us, certainly myself, were brought up to believe that we are kind of at the mercy of what's going on around us.
Yes.
And I think, what was a huge shift for me, especially as I deepened into the life coaching and thought work and all of that, personal development, was this idea that, I don't have to subscribe to that belief that age equals decline. I can simply decide, I can simply choose that is not going to be my mindset going forward. And so I think, a huge part of wellness is just reframing aging so that it doesn't become, so that it doesn't, we don't think of it as this fearful time where we're just, getting less and less healthy and less and less, exciting. I think the minute we kind of begin to reframe that, that in itself does amazing things for us in terms of our wellness. Just that mental shift.
Yes, absolutely. Wow, we've covered a lot of ground, but every one of those tips that you've given is just fabulous. So thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge with us. And I know you've got so much more to give. So I encourage everybody to really go jump on Karen's podcast and go to her website. I noticed she had some wonderful free resources there. In fact, there was one ebook that looked really cool. Could you just tell us about that, please?
Sure. I have several free resources, but there's one in particular that a lot of women are very excited about. It's called the Midlife Glow Up Guide.
Oh,
and
fabulous.
it includes some of what we spoke about today and many other tips as well. And it's 7 days to your healthiest, most radiant self. So it was kind of what we were talking about as far as, the starting point. It kind of gives women, just a place to begin, a 7-day period during which they can begin to create some healthy habits and learn a little bit about, how to best care for their over 40 body.
Fantastic. That just sounds so good. So I encourage you, listeners, watchers, go over there and get it. You'll find Karen's website details in the show notes that go along with this particular episode. So Karen, final last thought. What is one special takeaway you would love to leave with the people who've been listening in today?
What's something funny I'm going to remind everybody of? There was a funny meme that I saw a while back. Do you remember the show The Golden Girls?
Oh, love it. And the women in the Rocking Midlife community do too. We're always sharing memes in there. Yes.
I saw such a cute meme that I think highlights everything we've been talking about. On one side, it showed a picture of the Golden Girls and their ages. And it was like 53, 55, 50. I mean, they were in their 50s.
Yes.
And on the other side was a picture of the women from Sex and the City, or the new version of Sex and the City. And it showed their ages.
At the same ages,
same ages. And I think what that shows us is that, age, our idea about what a woman in midlife was back in the 80s was completely different from how we think about a woman in midlife now. Now,
So
can you
true.
imagine how our children are going to, if that trend continues, it almost feels like women are getting younger and younger.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's a great way to think about midlife. Like, it's not fixed. We are so much smarter now about how to care for ourselves. We have so much more information. We have so many more resources. We know how to, we know the role that mindset plays. So we really have the power to create our own version of midlife. We're not limited to that, quote unquote, Golden Girls version of midlife that we may have been brought up with.
Beautiful. Wow. Well, mic drop right there. So all done and dusted right there. Karen, thank you so much for coming on and just sharing your knowledge. Your passion shines through for when you're talking. It shows how much you really are lit up by this mission that you're on to support women in this stage of life. So more power to you, girl, with the amazing impact that you're having with your podcast and with your work. And a reminder, everybody, please go jump over and make sure you're following Karen's podcast, the Wellegant Woman Redefining Midlife Podcast. So make sure to go check that out. So thank you again, Karen. Thank you, everybody, for listening in, watching in. Please make sure to leave a review, to subscribe, to like, and most importantly, share this episode out so that other people can be encouraged as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.